the one thing that we have control over that can control our vagus nerve is our breathing. It's fascinating. Simply by slowing your breathing, imagining there's a balloon in your belly and filling that belly up as you're inhaling, slowly and holding it there, keeping your shoulders down, and then exhaling and deflating that balloon fully. Guess what? You just told your vagus nerve to start working.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with an expert on a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, as I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter at the moment. So very excited to be speaking with the Holistic Mama Doc, Dr. Elisa Song. And she's worked with thousands of kids in her holistic pediatric practice. Her credentials: she's a Stanford, NYU, UCSF-trained holistic pediatrician. She founded Whole Family Wellness, formerly Whole Child Wellness, an integrative pediatric practice in Belmont, California. And it's one of the first and most highly regarded holistic pediatric practices in the country. She then created Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, dedicated to empowering parents to take charge of their kids' health naturally. So Dr. Song, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with your audience.
Yeah, we're excited too. Many of us are in the ages where we have kids or other family members at this age. So yeah, really excited to be talking about this and coming at it from the holistic approach. This is what this podcast is really all about, is because a lot of times, I've dealt with this myself, going to traditional doctors with the kids and asking questions and them being kind of like, it must be, that you have to do this or it's this, or, kind of. So it's very interesting. So how do you, maybe just as a little bit of a background, maybe how did you kind of get into the work that you're doing, and how is your practice different than a traditional pediatrician?
Yeah. I would say my story is a little different than a lot of conventional doctors who have found functional medicine, holistic medicine, whatever you'd like to call it. Because many conventional docs who seek another path, they've done so because either of a health challenge themselves or of their family members, where conventional medicine didn't have all the answers. And I mean, knock on wood, that's not my story. When I was a kid, a teenager, I knew I wanted to work with children. I didn't know in what capacity. My mom was a very conventional OBGYN, and I thought, okay, I don't want to do that. I mean, because she was delivering all her own babies. I mean, this is back in the 70s and 80s, and busy. But, then somehow I found myself back into thinking I'd like to, maybe be a teacher, maybe be a civil rights lawyer. I actually was going to be a lawyer, and I still do a lot of public advocacy. But then I realized I want to work with children. And I decided to, at Stanford as a junior, switch gears completely and go pre-med and become a pediatrician. And it was at that point where I stumbled across a flyer that was really intriguing. This was in the late 80s, very early 90s. And I remember seeing one of those telephone poles with, the flyers stapled onto it. and it was a conference for the American Holistic Medical Association. And back then, I'd never heard the term holistic medicine. I'm like, what is that? And I was so curious that I took myself as a junior down to the Santa Clara Convention Center. And I heard people who were just starting to get known in the field, like Andrew Weil, Deepak Chopra, Joan Borisenko. And my mind was completely blown. I mean, just to have this eye-opening that medicine could look different, that it could be actually performed in a different way. And so that's always informed my path, even going through medical school and residency. And along the way, I've had amazing teachers and mentors like, Mark Hyman, and really so blessed to be on this path. And when I opened up my pediatric practice in 2004, straight out of residency, it was as an integrative functional medicine practice. Now, how is that different? I used to call myself a holistic pediatrician, and really talk about my practice as a holistic pediatric practice. But when we take a step back and look at what pediatricians do, we should all be holistic. We should all take that child in front of us in context of their whole family life, friend group, socioeconomic status, school environment, community setting. So we all are and should be providing holistic care. What I've really, now wanting to move towards is integrative pediatrics. And that's where we're not throwing the conventional, baby out with the bathwater. Right. A lot of times when we find root cause medicine and we find all these other more natural tools, the tendency is to think, okay, now, I'm not going to do anything conventional. And, there's a mistake in that as well, because we know that there are some clear benefits of conventional medications, conventional practices, all of these diagnostic imaging. However, we have to recognize that we are at the time and place where kids are not, where our kids are now paying the consequences for some of the unintended adverse negative effects of those interventions, like antibiotics, right? Or different, all the different things that we now understand have a ripple effect that's really not serving our children. And so then we can integrate all of these other amazing modalities that have evidence to them, like functional medicine, nutrition, herbal medicine, homeopathy, essential oils, and try to integrate the best of all worlds so that we can help create a personalized, unique approach for this very unique infant, toddler, child, or teen in front of us.
Interesting. Yeah. So integrative is different than the holistic functional in a sense that it will incorporate that, but also maybe incorporate some parts of traditional medicine. Is that kind of how integrative would be defined?
Yeah. For instance, okay, let's take an example. I just mentioned antibiotics. I mean, we are at the point now in our history where by 2050, which really is just around the corner, the World Health Organization and several experts are predicting that antibiotic resistance is going to become a leading cause of death worldwide. Now, why is that? Antibiotics absolutely can save lives. However, they are overprescribed and inappropriately prescribed. And for children, in some studies, up to 70% of antibiotics written for children are inappropriately written. Most likely because they're written for a viral infection. I mean, most kids, when they get sick, it's with some viral crud, right? Where antibiotics aren't going to touch their infection. Or perhaps it's just a stronger antibiotic than necessary. And so when we use our more natural integrative tools, there's so many ways we can help our kids get better faster and could reduce the need for unnecessary antibiotics. For instance, there was one study, a review, it was fascinating. I was looking at this large review of probiotics, probiotic supplementation. And this was a statistical economical analysis in the United States and found that regular probiotic use could actually reduce the number of sick days due to respiratory infections. This is total in the US by 54.5 million days.
Wow.
I mean, oh my gosh, right?
Right.
And, could also avoid millions of antibiotic prescriptions. And so, well, then we know, all right, let's only prescribe antibiotics if absolutely necessary. Let's know how to avoid and prevent the use of unnecessary antibiotics. And when they are necessary, knowing that antibiotics wreak havoc on your gut microbiome, destroy all the good bacteria, probiotics, along with, the not such good stuff. And the ripple effect that has on your child and teenagers developing brain, immune systems, hormones, metabolic processes. Let's then use our integrative functional medicine tools to heal their gut and get them back on a path to wellness, even after a course of antibiotics.
That's right. Yeah, very well said. And it's funny, I think the same way. Like, I'm always like, because I know I'm so afraid of antibiotics. I mean, you have to take them if you have to take them. But other than in a worst case scenario, and most parents, their kids get sick, so they take them not the ER, but like the, the first aid place or whatever, the local place, let's say it's after hours, they're sick, they go there. And what do they, most of the time they just prescribe you something, right? Prescribe you some
Yeah.
antibiotics or something like that. And you're not even 100% sure what it is. Do you really need it? Okay, maybe the antibiotics make the kid, heal and get better a day or two earlier, but now it's compromising the immune system, compromising all these other things. So my whole thing is like, if you can get through it without the antibiotics, now you've actually strengthened your immune system, made yourself a better, strengthened the immune system versus hurting it with the antibiotics. So yeah, I try to tell my wife all the time, like, please, like, let's not let them get antibiotics unless they absolutely have to. But I'm glad to hear you explain that as well, because I haven't heard too many people talk about that. I think it's important.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, first, most conventional docs, they just don't have any other tools, right? And so, I have a whole chapter in my book on what every parent and practitioner should know about antibiotics, because there's so many misunderstandings out there. And as you said, of course, if it's absolutely necessary, we're going to do it. But then as a parent, your kid's screaming, their ear hurts, they have a fever, and you go to urgent care. And how do you know as a parent? You're kind of trusting, the system and trusting the doc in front of you. And so, I give clear, guidelines on 6 questions to ask to know whether or not your kiddo might really need antibiotics. And then if they do, how do you preserve their microbiome afterwards, which is so key. And honestly, like the number one question you can ask your doctor, or the doctor, who's prescribing the antibiotic, the number one question to ask is, hey doc, is this antibiotic really necessary? Now, it sounds like a really simplistic question, but here's the thing. I mean, let's put yourself in the doctor's shoes. There's 20 charts lined up on the wall. The waiting room's packed. They have 5 minutes to see you, right? And your kid has a red ear, and they're like, all right, here's the antibiotic prescription. Because there are some parents too who don't know this information yet, and they go in wanting an antibiotic prescription for a cold virus or for, a tummy virus, right? And so they're doing, the easiest thing, because you're hedging your bets in urgent care. Well, it could be bacterial, so why not give the antibiotic without, thinking about the broader individual and public health consequences. So simply by asking that question, you are allowing that conversation. You're letting that doctor know, hey, I'm not one of those parents who just wants to walk out the door with a prescription, right? I'll do it if it's necessary, but I really want to have that conversation. And it really allows the doctor to think, okay, is this really necessary? Because some studies have shown that doctors are 2 times as likely to write a prescription for, an infection, even if they don't think the prescription is necessary, if they think that the patient wants one. So this is where having that dialogue, and, we want to be partners with our healthcare providers in the ideal world, right? You would have that open conversation, but yeah, just knowing that, you just ask, because let's take ear infections, for instance. The vast majority of ear infections for most kids, honestly, even if they're bacterial, they're going to resolve on their own without antibiotics, right? Now, if your kid's screaming in pain, you're like, okay, I just want something to help. And I've been there, my kids, screaming in pain or sore throat, and they're like, and you just want something to do or give them. And that's where, all right, then let's step back and think, okay, they might not need these antibiotics. They probably don't need these antibiotics. What else can we do? Well, in the evidence we know, hey, garlic, mullein, ear drops can do wonders to kill bacteria and viruses and help with the pain. There's homeopathic medicines. There's lavender essential oil that you can massage down their neck to help with some of the drainage. So many different things that we can do that as a parent of kids myself, you feel like, okay, I can do something. I can help them feel better. I don't just have to sit and watch them in pain. And also know, okay, I'm not using antibiotics if they're not necessary. I'm preserving their microbiomes. And I love that you said that when you allow your kids their bodies and immune systems to work through whatever infection they're going through, it really does strengthen their immune system for the next time, right? Yeah. It's the same thing with psychological stress. If you give your give your child's brain the tools, but if they have the tools to work through that stressor, oh my gosh, they're going to be so much stronger and have more grit and resilience for the next stressor. So, I mean, that is one of the hardest things as parents, isn't it? To sit there
Yes.
and just, let your kids work through things. But it is one of the most powerful ways that we can, get them to the point where we feel confident that they can be strong, healthy, resilient teenagers and young adults.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's a great conversation. And also, by the way, adults too. Like I remember hearing people recently saying like, "Oh, yeah, I'm feeling a little sick. I'm just going to go get a Z-Pack or something like that," or like,
Yeah.
and it's just like, no, like be very careful here, like
Yeah.
if it takes you one more day longer to recover, but you now have a stronger immune system, a good healthy gut microbiome, you come back better. Very, very important point here. So, what else are some common things that you're seeing that kids and parents are struggling with the most these days?
I mean, so much, right? I mean, there's so many things, and things that are really very different from the time that I was in medical school training in the um, mid 90s and residency in the late 90s. I mean, that's not that long ago, but it is, over 25 years ago, and things have changed. I mean, we are at the point now where just about 1 in 2 kids has at least one chronic diagnosis. I mean,
Wow.
that means, in your kiddo's classroom, like every other kid is going to have something. And we see it. I mean, it could be like a, mild to severe eczema. 1 in 5 kids has eczema. 1 in anywhere from 8 to 10 kids has attention, ADHD, right? 1 in 12 or 13 kids has anaphylactic food allergies. I mean, that's alarming. And we know by the time kids, I mean, you have 2 girls. I have, my oldest is she's 14. So our daughters, especially, once they get to their teenage years, I mean, 1 in 3 is at risk for anxiety and serious depression and suicidal thinking. And so we need to kind of wake up and realize these problems don't just appear suddenly. That little eczema patch that showed up, at 2 years of age, or maybe, I mean, I do have some, of course, a lot of babies, will have eczema very early on. The stage is set earlier, long before those problems show up. And that stage is really set for our babies and toddlers and tweens and teens in the gut microbiome that was shaped very early on in life and continues to develop and be shaped. I mean, our just for an example, there was one very large study, nearly 800,000 children, that followed kids who were given either antibiotics or antacid medications in the first 6 months of life. And we know those disrupt the gut microbiome, the developing gut microbiome. Well, they followed these kids and found that those kids who received those medications early on in life had a significantly increased risk, even double the risk, of virtually every single allergic disease by the time they were 4 years of age, because there's that education and that imprinting that their gut microbiome is doing to shape their immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Same, we know that with mental health concerns. We know from adults even, just one round of antibiotics significantly increases the risk of developing depression, anxiety, mental health concerns after that course. And the more rounds of antibiotics, the higher the risk. So it's not to say that, once this disruption to your child's or teen's gut microbiome has occurred, it's a done deal. We know that we can shape our gut microbiome and restore your gut microbiome back to health. But it's just to get that awareness out to parents and to kids to say, hey, you have an issue on your skin or your immune system. Autoimmunity is on the rise in kids, or a mental health concern. Well, you know what? Yes, I see your skin, your immune system, your hormones, your brain, everything seems out of whack. But the first place we have to look is at your gut microbiome. And it's knowing, understanding, all right, even if there's not any apparent, quote, gut symptoms, poop looks perfect and, no tummy aches, we still want to start with the microbiome. And that's where we can empower our kids and our parents to understand, how to really assess your child's gut microbiome health and how to restore your child's gut microbiome health. Or if nothing's, quote, gone wrong, that's awesome. How do we then help nourish your child's gut microbiome so everything thrives, for the rest of their life?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I would like to ask, how do you assess the health of your child's gut microbiome?
So, we can suspect that there's signs of, quote, leaky gut or quote, gut dysbiosis just simply by having a chronic health concern, we know that there's going to be something going on in the gut. Now, your gut microbiome can become disrupted in a couple of different ways. There can be some quote leakiness where the tight, your small intestinal cells are held together by something called a tight junction. I mean, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tight junction that prevents toxins, infections, food allergens, pollens, things like that from getting into your bloodstream and causing more allergic or sensitizing reactions. That can occur. The signs of a leaky gut can include anything: eczema, anxiety, attention, focus problems, behavior concerns. So I always presume that there's some element of quote leakiness or increased intestinal permeability, and work on the gut in that way. And we can do what I call the gut reset to, really seal and heal that leaky gut, and restore the microbiome back to health. Now, the gut microbiota, so that's all the trillions of microorganisms, the bacteria, there's viruses, there's yeast, there's even parasites in there. Some good for us, some not so good for us. The only way to really, really know if there's an imbalance like that going on is really to do what's called a comprehensive or a functional stool analysis. So when I have an opportunity to do that, I love to do that. Now, there are some signs, if your kids have a yeast overgrowth in their intestines, I might see some signs in your kiddo, like, the kiddos who, and adults too, frankly, for that matter, who tend to have a yeast intestinal overgrowth or dysbiosis. They're the ones who crave sugar, like just absolutely, because yeast feed on sugar. For adults, think about, if anyone's ever brewed their own beer, right? And or kombucha, let's say kombucha, right? And you have that yeast in there, or you've baked bread and you have yeast in there. What do you need to feed the yeast to grow? It's sugar, right? And so when we have yeast inside us, they literally send signals to our brain, feed me, And so when you're craving sugar and like really craving, then that to me is a sign, we have to think that there's probably some yeast in there, right?
Interesting.
And the other thing that yeast can do when they ferment that sugar, what happens in your kombucha or your beer when that yeast ferments the sugar? It creates alcohol, right? And so when we think about that, the very same thing is happening in our gut when we have a lot of yeast. And when our kids are eating sugar in the form of pasta, crackers, rice, cookies, cakes, desserts, ice cream, all of that. And when they get that sugar and they ferment that sugar, they create these alcohol byproducts that slip in through our bloodstream, right? Just like alcohol does. And if you have kids who literally sometimes act as though they're tipsy or drunk, and think about all the different ways, as an adult now, we've probably seen plenty of examples, right? Of, the person who's had one too many and they're weepy and sad and they just want to be left alone. And then in a split second, they'll be angry and, aggressive and, throwing things or yelling, or they'll be really spacey and goofy and just laughing nonstop and clumsy. Right. And so if you think about your kids, and if you have moments where like, oh my gosh, they're acting really loopy. They're acting like as though, they had one too many, and I know they didn't have anything, right? They're little. That's a clear sign to me that, all right, we need to look and treat any yeast in there. That's going to get rid of their sugar cravings. It's going to help then without the yeast and the sugar cravings there, going to help with their attention and focus and mood, their skin, their immune system, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned like a gut reset, or just in general, people are probably wondering, okay, like how do I improve the gut microbiome of my kid? What are some things we should avoid? And, obviously we've heard the sugars and things like that. What else are, and it's interesting because kids seem to be a lot more resilient than adults, right? Especially like, I remember when I was a kid, my dad was like, "Hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? McDonald's or Burger King?" Right. And I just ate garbage, and it didn't seem to bother me at the time, really, honestly. I mean, probably I could have been smarter and performed better and happier or whatever, but didn't really seem to bother me that much. Whereas now, if I eat anything like that, forget about it, right? So it
Yeah.
seems like they have a lot more resilience. It seems like they need even a little bit more carbs if they're active than
Yep.
potentially,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, I'm curious what overall your nutrition, like what you think do's and don'ts for kids.
Yeah. Well, and I will say it may, yes, that kids seem like they can handle a lot of the junk that, as adults we're like, oh, that's going to make my joints hurt, or, oh yeah, I'm definitely my stomach's going to hurt, my head's going to hurt the next day. But, we have to think over time. I mean, we are exposed to, toxins in our food, in our air, in our water. I mean, all different sources, from the moment we're conceived
Mm-hmm.
through the end of our life, right? And so, kids are kind of, their overall bucket of toxins still remains low, but it kind of builds up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's at a certain point when that toxic bucket, that inflammation bucket overflows, that we start to have symptoms. And some kids start to have symptoms very early on. Some kids not until their 20s, 30s, 40s. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I was so healthy before. Like, why all of a sudden now? And it's really not all of a sudden. It's more this like simmering, we can see with autoimmunity.
Mm-hmm.
We know that in your blood work, you can have signs of autoimmune markers like diabetes, type 1 autoimmune antibodies, or, very specific an autoimmune antibody called an ANA, or anti-nuclear antibody. You can have those for sometimes 20 plus years before your body ever says, hey, I'm in trouble. Right. And
Right.
so, we still want to, because I have parents and, grandparents, I mean, whomever, just say, well, just, they're fine. Just let them be kids. Right. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, let them be kids. Great. But I don't want them to end up like an adult in this modern world that has, not just one, but 2, 3, 4, chronic health concerns. Right.
Right.
So what can we do? I mean, there's so much we can do. And in terms of nutrition, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but I'm thinking now, especially for our teenagers, who are like our teen athletes who are trying to do their best, and they're hearing all this about protein, 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 right? And I'm getting this like every day in the office talking about protein, right? Protein absolutely is really important because most people, most kids swing towards too many carbs and not enough protein and healthy fats and fruits and vegetables, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in that sense, sure, we want to lower the carbs and really focus on whole grains with more fiber in it, more protein in it. But then, for our teenagers, I have some teenagers who are just trying to load in the protein. They're not really that into eating that much protein. Maybe they want steaks every night at dinner, but during the day, they're just packing in protein bars and protein shakes. And it's like, that may be an okay supplement, but supplements are not intended to replace food. There's a wisdom in the food, the synergy of, let's say, a whole egg, that
Mm-hmm.
you can't get simply by having, a protein shake in the morning with some whey protein or pea protein. And so we still want to get back to whole foods, and the foods that we want to focus on. You're right. Kids do need carbs for sure, right? I mean, for their energy, for their brain, right? Your brain needs those carbs for fuel. So we really want to think about, and it's going to be I'm going to guess similar for an adult. I mean, what I want on a kiddo's plate is, half of their plate to be, awesome, colorful vegetables. Now, those colorful vegetables, why are those? I mean, we really want to tell kids why, the why. So when we think about vegetables, I mean, they have all sorts of different fiber. When we think about nourishing our gut microbiome, your beneficial bacteria that protect your immune system, that actually make your brain chemicals like serotonin to feel calm and good, and dopamine to stay focused and on task, those microbiota, those probiotics, they need plants to grow and thrive. That's all they feed on, right? They feed on the fiber from plants like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, beans. So we want to make sure those are a really healthy part of our kids' diet. And that if we simply focus on that, I mean, I would imagine most kids are getting, on their plate. So half vegetables, a quarter of your whole grains or some sort of a starch, right? And then a quarter be that healthy protein. And with that, you can have healthy fats kind of layered in, avocado, olive oil, on your vegetables. And then the protein, it's interesting. What kind of protein? You can use plant-based proteins. You get more grams of protein though per serving with animal protein. I think a healthy balance. There was one study, it's a little bit old now, but found that, kids who had a diet largely of a Western diet of animal proteins and fried foods had something like 7 times the risk of ADHD than kids who had more of a plant forward, plant rich diet, more of a Mediterranean type diet with fruits and vegetables and legumes and seafood. So really trying to be mindful of that. And then, as we think about what else, one of the things that I teach kids even very early on, but especially teenagers, is as we're kind of going out and about and buying our packaged foods, and packaged foods can be, quote, healthy, right? I mean, you go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods and you buy some packaged foods. It's modern life. And we have canned spaghetti sauces and salad dressings in our cupboard. And, we buy packaged foods, but it's very important to be very, very savvy in reading the food label. And I teach kids and teens I call it reading food labels like a gut hero, because you have to make it practical and doable, and you have to make it fun and memorable. And so, we talked about the sugars, but that's one thing. Once you start reading food labels, kids and adults can get pretty good at looking at the label and seeing, oh my gosh, this quote food has 50 ingredients in it to make it taste good. Maybe I don't want to eat that. Or, oh, there's all of these odd sounding ingredients that I have to look up and I don't even know what they're in this food for. Okay, we put that back. So we learn about that. But then one of the things with the added sugars are that many organic, whole foods, really, quote, healthy foods are going to be laden with added sugars. So that is something I want kids and adults to really look at, because it is shocking how that can slip in. In my book, I give an example. I have a worksheet called the Daily Added Sugar Inventory, where you just take a normal everyday, diet, and you just count the grams of added sugar in what you've eaten at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And I have had my, functional medicine, very holistic minded friends, colleagues, practitioners take the inventory, and their eyes are wide. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, because I wasn't looking at the fact that, that vanilla Greek yogurt that I was giving my kids in the morning had almost, 28 grams of added sugar, which is somewhere that's about, 4.5, let's see. Yeah, it's about 4.5 teaspoons of added sugar. So, just that alone. I tell kids and parents, if you can learn two things before you head off to college, it's going to set you up for health for the rest of your life. That's reading food labels like a gut hero, and number 2, learning how to regulate your nervous system. So those two things, I feel like if we can teach our kids that, they can learn all the other life skills. They can learn how to clean a toilet. They can learn how to do their laundry. That's great. But those 2 skills are going to really carry them forward for the rest of their lives.
Amazing. And I want to talk about the second one, regulating your nervous system, in just a second. But first, I just kind of want to wrap up on the nutrition part. So again, they might need more carbs. Like, what's your opinion on, for example, seed oils, which seem to be in almost every snack for kids or adults, right? I try to make healthy switches sometimes. So one of my daughters really likes potato chips. So I say, okay, I'm going to buy the Boulder Canyon potato chips that have olive oil or avocado oil instead of the, canola oil or something like that. So I'll try to make kind of a healthy switch like that. I try to avoid the seed oils, but really they're almost in every protein shake, almost in every protein bar, almost in every cracker or snack or anything you can find. Is it okay for kids, in your opinion, from that perspective?
Yeah, that's such an interesting topic. It's funny. I was at the store with my son, and we just bought a package of Boulder chips too, because
Yes.
I said, let's look at the ingredients, and this is, it's a better swap, or and we'll look and see, because the thing that drives me crazy are the Takis, right, and just
Mm.
all of the artificial colors and the
Oof.
MSG and the emulsifiers, and so we've landed on the the Siete Fuego chips. So we're always, I love that. One point that you're bringing up is it's not enough to tell our kids, like, don't eat that junk. We have to give them alternatives, or we have to teach them how to find alternatives. Because of
Right.
course, who doesn't love a good bag of potato chips, And so, teaching them how to make those. But with the seed oils, I think, like everything else, you're right. They are virtually unavoidable. What I try to look for are organic or expeller pressed. So at least they're not going to be as refined. Whether or not they're highly inflammatory. Sunflower oil in and of itself really shouldn't be highly inflammatory. It's just in the processing, I think. So if you can find expeller pressed, I think, that's, and I'm seeing more and more companies that are really trying to use the expeller pressed, cold pressed, organic seed oils.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that. Okay, so organic seed oil, or ideally expeller pressed, or ideally organic expeller pressed seed oil would be much less refined and healthier, in your opinion?
Absolutely, because those
Mm.
are, they're kind of pressed to get out the oils without all of the industrial maneuverings that are required to get an oil out more quickly and
Mm.
cheaply. So I do think, and then with everything else, I think I always think, how can we create a health bubble around the things that aren't ideal? Right. And there are a lot of things that aren't ideal in our lives, but at the same time, I understand, how fun it is to go out with your friends after school and get a boba tea, right? Or, do whatever it is. For adults and kids, a lot of our socialization occurs around food. And so sometimes you want that thing that we know is not going to be that great for us. So
Hmm.
really kind of cushioning that, if we're going to choose a, mocha double chocolate frappuccino with whatever, 55 grams of added sugar and emulsifiers in it. All the things. Okay, let do that. This is what I tell my kids: do it, enjoy it, right? Have a great time with your kids and with your friends, but then understand that that could have some impact on your soccer performance later on that day, or studying for a test the next day. So let's pay attention, let's connect the dots and really pay attention to how that makes you feel, how that makes your body feel, your brain feel, whatever it is, so that you can make an even more informed choice the next time. Because my son notices, if he has a big sugar bomb, he's not that great at soccer, than that afternoon or the next day. And he really wants to, be a better soccer player. He wants to hone his soccer athletic skills. So he knows, okay, before a tournament weekend, he's going to lay off, right?
Right.
And then when you have, that whatever thing you're going to have, then they know, all right, we're going to make decisions afterwards to really cushion the impact, cushion the sugar impact, cushion the whatever artificial dye impact, and make sure that we're eating a plate, loaded with color, natural color, phytonutrients from
Hmm.
our plants, and fiber, maybe get in some fermented foods that are going to help your gut and your brain and your immune system get back on track quickly.
Yeah, great points. Avoiding the artificial colors, right? Even in the cereals. Recently, there have been some protests, thankfully,
Yep.
in these cereal companies for having ingredients in the US that they don't use in any other country, which are toxic ingredients, right? So staying away from all those kind of Fruit Loops type of artificial flavored stuff, like you said, the Takis and all that kind of stuff. Even eat like Doritos versus an organic Doritos, right? And so, like, when I look at everything, I'm always thinking, I feel like sometimes I know too much. It's maybe to my own detriment because I'm always like, oh no, if they eat that, that's going to affect their mood later on, and they're this and they're that. And it's like, it's obviously as a parent, we're always trying to find that balance. But yeah, so this is really good stuff. I do want to touch on what you mentioned because it's very interesting about regulating their nervous system is the other really important thing for kids. So how as a parent or how as a kid can they learn to regulate their nervous system?
So regulating our nervous systems, I feel like, I mean, this is not just for kids, it's for parents too, right? It's for adults. I mean, it is one of the most important things we can do for our health. And I'm not just talking about mental health. I'm talking about, immune and physical health. I mean, all the things that we think of as promoting longevity. It's so important. And, I will talk with kids in an age appropriate way, but I talk about, when we're in that stress zone. All stress isn't bad, right? We need a certain amount of stress. In fact, I will show them something called a peak performance curve, where you have on the up and down is your performance level, and on the horizontal x-axis is your stress level. And as you have down here, zero stress, right? Well, guess what? Zero stress leads to zero performance, really, right? If you never had a deadline, if you never had oh my gosh, I have my school play coming up, and that gets you to, practice your lines, right? So zero stress is not such a great thing. And that can lead to indifference, apathy, boredom, depression, all the things, right? And then we all know we get to this place where we have a little more stress, the deadline's coming up, and all of a sudden we're in the zone, we're focused, we're in flow. I mean, whatever you want to call it, right? But you get your work done and you're at this state of peak performance up here. And if we can stay there, and then the deadline's done or the soccer tournament's done, we go back down to kind of maybe right here, where now we're in a steady state of performance, maybe not peak, but we're still performing and we're happy, right? But then what happens if you have your school deadlines, your friend drama, social media, all the family conflict, all of a sudden the stress goes higher, 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 performance goes down. So too much of that stress, performance goes down. And on this end, we get to anger, irritability, burnout, right? So there's a sweet spot. So the first thing to know is to make sure that we don't consider stress a bad word in and of itself. Right? Stress is simply your body's response to getting ready for something. And I think in our modern world, for many of us, we've defined, and our kids have defined stress as, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. I don't want any stress in my life. I don't want my kids to be stressed. And that's not serving ourselves or our kids, because by running away from every stress, we're not ever able then to get into that peak performance area where we tolerate that stress to get to the finish line, essentially, right? And so we don't want to avoid stress. That's one thing. But then in our modern world, as many of us experience, it's not just one deadline. There's, multiple stressors, day in, day out, hour after hour. And so that puts us into this constant fight or flight mode where, we're late to school and we're rushing to get out the door. That's stress. And then when we get to school, okay, we got there on time, but now it's a mean text that I got. And then you're kind of surging again. And then that goes down, and then there's the exam. So we're constantly in this sympathetic fight or flight state, which again, that's your body saying, all right, we're getting ready for something. But when it's constant, it needs to be balanced. And the counterbalance to that is called our parasympathetic nervous system, or our vagus nerve, which controls our parasympathetic. So when we have that fight or flight from, being late to work, and we get to work on time, we don't need to be in an alarm state anymore. Our vagus nerve needs to kick in, regulate our nervous system, and get us back into that rest, digest, restore state. We have plenty of opportunities every day, our kids and us as adults, to be in that fight or flight. We have very rare opportunities to regulate our nervous system and go back down into parasympathetic. And that's where we have to mindfully every day work on engaging our vagus nerve and regulating our nervous system. Now, you can do things like, walking in nature as a family, hugging and kissing, laughing, doing meditation and, mindfulness. All of those can help regulate your nervous system. They help kick in your vagus nerve so that you can get out of fight or flight. And I put it that way because I don't, a lot of kids and teenagers, they have a mindfulness class in school and they kind of raise their eyebrows like, oh yeah, roll their eyes. That's when I get to take a nap, right? And adults can do the same thing, right? But when you put it in the context of, look, when you actually kick in your vagus nerve, that is what gets you out of fight or flight. And also, it's not just about feeling good or happy or calm. For me, I tell, kids, that is an amazing side effect of walking in nature, of laughing, of, doing breath work. That's a great side effect. But the real reason for me as a pediatrician, as your doctor, to do all this is because engaging your vagus nerve and regulating your nervous system lowers chronic inflammation. It regulates your blood sugar. It balances your hormones. It reduces chronic pain. It enhances sports performance. All of these amazing benefits that if you feel calm and happy while you're doing it, great. But I'm looking more from the inside out, right? And so, one of the best tools that we have that's completely free is learning how to breathe with our belly, or called our diaphragmatic breathing. We can't really control our stress response. It's part of what's called our autonomic nervous system, which could also be called our automatic nervous system. Because when we're kind of in that fight or flight and our heart's beating and our pupils are dilated, we can't tell our heart to slow down. It's nothing we can do will slow it down. The one thing that we have control over that can control our vagus nerve is our breathing. It's fascinating. Simply by slowing your breathing, imagining there's a balloon in your belly and filling that belly up as you're inhaling slowly and holding it there, keeping your shoulders down, and then exhaling and deflating that balloon fully. Guess what? You just told your vagus nerve to start working. And if you do that 5 times, you just made your heart rate slow down. You just helped yourself get out of fight or flight. And so that, throughout the day, while you're driving to work, or driving your kids to school and you're frazzled, because everyone was kind of rushed out the door. Take a moment while you're driving, just do your belly breaths. Or kids, before they have an exam or have to get up and, talk in front of class. Or, I have a couple of kiddos who before their baseball tournaments, they just get this overwhelming kind of panic. Just slow down, slow your breath, 10 slow, deep breaths, and nobody has to know what you're doing. I mean, that's the thing. It's not, you don't have to go and sit in lotus position in the corner of the room. You can just slow your breath down. So I feel like, as simple as it is, sometimes the most profound things that we do are the most simple. It's just that we have to do them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tip for both adults and kids. If I could get my kids now to learn to practice breathing, like you said, deep belly breaths, I think that, it's an amazing hack. It's an amazing trick. I think one thing, even myself, a lot I've been working on recently is not being reactive. How can, when something happens, can I stay calm and cool and not succumb to the initial kind of habit of reacting or whatever it is right away, right? Can you control yourself? And breathing is certainly one of the most powerful tools that you can use anywhere in order to do that. So that's really, really great stuff. Dr. Song, this has been absolutely amazing. Where can people, I know you have the book, please tell people a little bit about the book and where they can buy it and where they can follow you and learn more.
Yeah. So the best place to follow me is, my website is healthykidshappykids.com. I'm most active on Instagram. That's healthykids_happykids. And my book came out earlier in May of 2024. It's called Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, an Integrative Pediatrician's Guide to Whole Child Resilience. And I've been told it's kind of like, two books in one. So the first part of the book really lays down, and I love when kids and teens also read parts of the book because they will also have aha moments, kind of lays down why your child's microbiome really holds that key, that foundation for their immune system, their brains, even their epigenetic potential. And then it goes into, well, how does something go wrong? How does your gut microbiome become disrupted? What does that look like? How do we go through the gut reset together, right? And reset your gut. And part of that is really how do we nourish your gut microbiome? So I go through the 5 things to create microbiome magic. And there are 5 things that we do every single day, because this is not just a hack that you do for 2 to 3 months. It's how you live your life. So the 5 things we do every single day: we have to eat every day, we have to breathe or engage our vagus nerve every day, we have to move, sleep, and hydrate every day. So how do we do those in a way that nourish your microbiome, that create microbiome magic? And then the last part of the book is my kind of A to Z top 25 common pediatric conditions, from anywhere from colds and flus to fevers to eczema, anxiety, sleep problems, and how to use integrative tools. So, diet and lifestyle supplements, homeopathy, herbs, essential oils, acupressure points. It's basically, I was trying to think of how the resource that I would want parents to have if they don't have a holistic integrated pediatrician near them. So this would be the exact advice that if you call me in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, Dr. Song, my kid's wheezing, it's 2 a.m, what do I do?" You just flip to that back, part 4, and see, okay, these are some homeopathic remedies I might try. Here's some essential oils on these on these acupuncture points. And really importantly also, what signs to look for when you really should go to the ER or to the doctor, and tips for when antibiotics might be needed and what to do to mop up, the unintended microbiome effects if they are.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I can't wait to get into it myself. This has been an absolute pleasure. And highly recommend everyone get the book, especially obviously parents. Thank you so much for your time here today, Dr. Song. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much myself, and I hope we can have you back on again sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.